Mino sat in the back row of the galactic history classroom, her human features carefully concealed beneath the standard-issue biosynthetic mask that made her appear Zalarian. The blue-tinted skin projection and the carefully crafted extra set of arms moved naturally now after 3 years of practice. Beside her, James shifted uncomfortably, his own disguise flickering slightly as his emotional dampeners struggled to keep up with his rising agitation. Professor Zenkar, a towering Dominion scholar with crystalline formations jutting from his skull, gestured dramatically at the holographic display floating above the lecture pit. The image showed a blue-green planet, scarred and broken, its surface marred by what appeared to be massive craters. And thus, Zenkar's voice resonated through the amphitheater, reaching the 200 students from 17 different species. We come to the final chapter of the human saga. Terra, as they called their homeworld, now serves as a monument to the dangers of unchecked aggression and primitive thinking. Mino's jaw clenched beneath her mask. James placed a subtle hand on her arm, feeling the tension radiating from her. The humans, the professor continued, his tone carrying the clinical detachment of someone discussing an extinct insect species, were remarkable in their capacity for violence. Archaeological evidence suggests they were the only known species to weaponize stellar matter itself. Their final war lasted merely 72 standard hours, but in that time, they managed to render their entire planet uninhabitable. A Zelkrin student in the middle section raised one of her forearms. Professor, the historical records indicate some human settlements existed on other worlds. Surely some survived? Zenkar's crystalline formations pulsed with what Mino had learned to recognize as amusement. An understandable question, Velnara. Yes, there were human colonies scattered across roughly 40 systems. However, when Terra fell, something curious happened. Within 1 standard year, every single human settlement simply vanished. The classroom buzzed with interest. A Thulian student's translator crackled as it spoke. Vanished how, Professor? That remains one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries, Zenkar replied, clearly relishing the dramatic pause. Some scholars theorize mass suicide pacts. Others suggest they fled beyond the galactic rim. The most widely accepted theory is that they succumbed to what we now term species grief, a psychological collapse that occurs when a species loses its homeworld. James leaned closer to Mino, whispering through their private comm channel. This is ridiculous. We need to leave before. The fascinating aspect, the professor continued, is that humans possessed several traits that, under different circumstances, might have made them valuable contributors to galactic civilization. They showed unusual adaptability, forming pair bonds across species lines. They demonstrated remarkable problem-solving abilities when faced with seemingly impossible situations. Some records even suggest they were capable of what we might call impossible innovation, technological breakthroughs that defied conventional understanding. Mino's mask began to flicker. 3 years of listening to her people being described as extinct, as failures, as cautionary tales, finally reached its breaking point. However, Zenkar's voice carried a note of dismissal. These positive traits were ultimately overshadowed by their fundamental flaw, an inability to control their emotional responses. They were, in essence, too human for their own good. The professor's crystalline formations pulsed again, and several students made sounds that their translators rendered as laughter. That was the moment Mino stood up. Her movement was so sudden that several nearby students turned to look. James grabbed at her arm, but she gently pulled away, her biosynthetic disguise finally failing completely as her emotional state overwhelmed its systems. The blue Zalarian skin faded away, revealing olive-toned human flesh. The extra arms dissolved into nothing. Her black hair, no longer hidden beneath the holographic projections, caught the classroom's artificial lighting. A wave of silence spread through the amphitheater as 200 beings from 17 different worlds stared at something they had been taught was impossible. Professor Zenkar's crystalline formations went completely dark, the equivalent of a human's jaw dropping open. Mino took a deep breath and spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the acoustic design of the lecture hall. "Professor, if humanity is extinct, then who am I?" The silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then James stood up as well, his own disguise failing, revealing sandy brown hair and the lean build typical of humans from the outer colonies. "And who am I?" he added, moving to stand beside Mino. Professor Zenkar's formations began pulsing rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation. This is impossible. The records clearly show—" "The records show what you wanted them to show," Mino interrupted, stepping down toward the lecture pit. Several students scrambled out of her way, though whether from fear or simple shock, she couldn't tell. "Did it never occur to any of you to wonder why human settlements vanished so completely? Why there were never any bodies found, any debris, any signs of struggle?" She reached the bottom of the amphitheater and looked up at the professor, who seemed to have shrunk somehow despite his impressive height. "We didn't vanish," she continued. "We adapted. We learned. We integrated. We became you." She gestured to the students around her. "How many others in this classroom are wearing biosynthetic disguises? How many Zellarians and Thulians and Zelkrins are actually human?" A ripple of movement went through the student body as several other disguises began to fail. 5 more students revealed themselves as human, then 12, then 23. James joined Mino at the bottom of the amphitheater. "You taught us. We were extinct," he said, addressing the professor directly. "You made that our greatest weapon. Who suspects a ghost? Who prepares for a species that doesn't exist?" Professor Zenkar's voice came out as barely a whisper. "But Terra, the archaeological evidence." Mino smiled, and for the first time in 3 years it was her real smile. "Terra is fine, Professor, we just moved it." The holographic display above them flickered and changed, showing not a scarred wasteland, but a blue-green world orbiting a different star, surrounded by a fleet of vessels that bore no resemblance to any known galactic technology. "Class dismissed," Mino said softly. And across 17 different worlds, similar scenes were playing out in classrooms, government buildings, and military academies, as humanity finally decided it was time to stop being extinct.